It was a rather typical Monday afternoon, sometime last year, that I spoke to a young girl about her university experience. And as the words poured out of her mouth, I felt the strangest feeling of familiarity. It was like, in that moment, I had left my 9-to-5 job here in Aberdeen and went back about 5 years to the London University Library where I so often end up. And in that moment, I was on the phone to myself. The words, the thoughts, just the feelings of this young girl so mirrored what I had just gone through a few years ago. And that telephone conversation that day, and ultimately the relationship that was birthed from that, is the inspiration for my talk today. Advice to the girl in the yearbook. Advice is quite a serious word. I'd much rather say tips or pointers. And the girl in the yearbook is who I used to be, my 17-year-old self. Having completed high school and the incredibly grueling process that is the International Baccalaureate, I had my whole life ahead of me. And as you can see, my parting words in Adaeze's 2009 yearbook was by Stephen Covey, the best-selling author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it says, to live, to love, to learn, and to leave a legacy. And according to Stephen Covey, these are fundamentals for human fulfillment. But what I want to share with you today, as people that might be at the same stage in life as that girl in the yearbook, are my 3 tips for leaving a legacy or creating a lasting impact in the lives of those around you. And the first of these 3 would be to be yourself. I don't know why, but I remember it so clearly the day that I was advised not to be myself. At the age of 11, I, along with the rest of my family, left our home country and moved to Scotland. And at that delicate age of 11, I wasn't quite young enough to just take everything in and adapt, but I wasn't old enough to understand the differences in culture. So, on this day, I was walking in between classes, talking with a friend of mine, in an accent that must have sounded a little bit more like this. And she stops me mid-sentence and she leans in, and bless her soul, she thought she was about to give me the best advice of my life. She says, Adaeze, you're gonna have to stop talking like that. And then she goes on to give me a quick rundown of how I should increase my pitch at the end of every sentence to make sure I sounded like everybody else. And I took her advice. At least I tried to. I tried as hard as possible to change the way that I was so accustomed to talking. But it didn't just stop there. I did everything in my power to blend into that 7th grade class instead of celebrating what makes me different. Fast forward about 10 years or so, and here I am standing in front of you as a firm believer in the fact that every individual is created unique. And there are attributes that only you can bring to the table. And the only way you're going to figure out what these are is by developing your quirks, things that make you stand out from the crowd. Learn to use these to your advantage. And so, to this girl in the yearbook, I would say, don't be afraid to be who you are. Be absolutely unapologetic about it. Now, like this girl, and many others her age, it was time to take the next step in life. And for most of us, that meant university applications. Now, we all had our dream schools where we wanted to end up, but it didn't always work out like that. And sometimes receiving that rejected university application, it felt like the whole world was coming to an end. But was it really? My next tip to the girl in the yearbook would be to love failure. My first and major encounter with failure was through rejected university applications. And since then, until now, although I can tell you a number of successes in my life, I've also had a lot of failures. Failed university applications, failed job applications, failed interviews, failed friendships, failed relationships, And through all of this, I've learned that we actually learn and grow more from our failures than we do from our successes. I've also noticed that even the mere sound of the word failure invokes a sense of dread in most people. This is because we live in a world that is diametrically adverse and essentially outlaws and demonizes failing. And these can be seen from the current medium that connects us all, social media. Now, show of hands, who's on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr? Exactly, that's most of us here. And it's not just the younger generation. Even the older generation are now connected via social media. For example, my mother got her first Instagram account just a few months ago. Now she's the first to like and comment on all my pictures. But as great as these pictures are, as great as these mediums are, all these pictures that are perfectly edited and posted for the world to see, they create a pressure within that I'm only allowed to share the best parts of my life. Or even worse, they make you feel like the best snaps of somebody else's life, that represents their whole life. So you could imagine my surprise when I saw something completely antithetical to the status quo. Last year, Johannes Haushofer, a professor of psychology and public affairs at the Princeton University, published a CV of failures. And to start it off, he says this: most of what I try fails, but these failures are often invisible, while my successes are visible. I have noticed that this sometimes gives people the impression that most things work out for me. And as a result, they're more likely to attribute their own failures to themselves. This CV of failures is an attempt to balance the record and provide some perspective. Professor Haushofer then goes on to detail degree programs that he did not get into, and academic positions and fellowships that he did not get, awards and scholarships, paper rejections from academic journals. And this publication, you could say, broke the internet because it received so much attention in such a short amount of time. And this is because Professor Haushofer was able to reveal a part of himself that most people would probably hide. He was able to reveal the vulnerable failures in life that most people would probably hide. So, to the girl in the yearbook, I would say this: love failures, embrace them, and take time to learn from them. Throughout my time in university, I spent the first 3 years immersing knowledge on materials. So polymers and metals and ceramics, and how all these materials can be used to be made into components for the medical application, because I did an undergraduate degree in medical material science. And after that, I went on to spend another year immersing knowledge on the oil and gas industry, its reservoirs, its fluids, its production mechanisms, during my master's degree in Petroleum Engineering. And after those 4 years, I realized that I've spent a great deal of time learning about the outside world and taking that in, but I haven't spent a lot of time getting to know who I am as a person. So my next tip to the girl in the yearbook would be to learn yourself. Spend time getting to know who you are as a person and why you do the things you do the way you do them. Understand your strengths, your weaknesses, your passions, your values, and what motivates you. Learning and understanding myself is a journey I'm still on until this very moment. But what I can share with you are some practical tips and practical things that you can do that have helped me in my journey towards self-awareness. And the first of these would be to take a personality test. I know this sounds quite obvious and maybe just too simple, but personality tests do help a great deal in getting to know who you are as a person. The test I found most beneficial and actually quite accurate is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. It's a questionnaire developed by a mother and daughter Catherine Cook Briggs, and Isabel Myers, that indicate the psychological preferences in how people see the world and how they make decisions. In case you're wondering, I'm an INFJ, which means I am introverted as opposed to extroversion, and I tend to use my intuition when I'm making decisions. F for feeling, so I value personal circumstances and I can be quite subjective. And J, judgment, which means I value predictability and I plan things ahead. Secondly, I would say keep a journal. Now, I haven't always been a fan of journaling. In fact, I used to ridicule the whole idea. To me, writing in a journal is what teenage girls did when they had a crush. But over the past few years, my rationale has completely changed. I've seen immense benefits from writing down a few words, or a few phrases, or a few paragraphs every single day. It's helped me realize dreams and goals that I didn't think would be mine. And it's also pretty great going back about 2 to 3 years and reading your journal entries from that time and seeing how much you've grown and how much you've changed in that time. So in the words of Jim Rohn, I would say, if you're serious about becoming wealthy, powerful, sophisticated, influential, cultured, and a unique individual, keep a journal. Don't trust your memory. If you have an idea, write it down. If you hear something valuable, write it down. And if you come across something important, write it down. And finally, I would say just ask others. Look out for people that you trust and that you believe know you well, and ask them questions like, what do you think are my greatest strengths? And what do you see as my biggest flaw? Asking other people will probably reveal a side to you that you may not have realized. So in the past 3 years, I've realized that the more I get to know myself, the more I can assert what I want in life, in my career, and in relationships. So to the girl in the yearbook, I would say, spend time getting to know yourself. Now, going back to that typical Monday afternoon when I felt like I was on the phone to myself, I was actually impacting the life of somebody else. And that is something that everybody seated here today can achieve. We all have people in our spheres of influence that need the experiences that we've been through to guide them through difficult situations. And a way to achieve this, a way to make sure that we impact the lives of those around us, is to make sure that 1, we are true to ourselves. 2, we love failure and embrace it and learn from it. And 3, we spend time and we spend energy in self-discovery. Thank you.